What does it mean to say a performance is too theatrical or is over the top? And is that always a bad thing? This
Hark! Triton!
is one of my favorite moments of performance from the last few years.
Bid our father, the Sea King, rise from the depths full foul in his fury.
And it's Willem Dafoe doing what he does best, committing fully to a moment in a way that is equal parts mesmerizing and unhinged.
And plunges right through your gullet!
You from, Texas, Mr. Burrow?
Oh, I'm from all over.
Dafoe's performances often channel something that feels to me larger than life, something evocative, sometimes terrifying, but always bold and undeniably cinematic.
I'm all ears.
But he's also sometimes faced criticism for being too big or doing too much in his performances. He's had a long, successful, and varied career in film, but I think recently there's been a newfound appreciation for his talent. And 2024 marked his third year in a row as the most watched actor on Letterboxd. This status of most watched isn't just an indicator of how much audiences love to watch him on screen. It also reveals that he's an artist filmmakers love to cast. He's had recurring roles in films from Wes Anderson, Robert Eggers, Yorgos Lanthimos, and over the years he's done work with Guillermo del Toro, Paul Schrader, Martin Scorsese, Catherine Bigelow, Sam Raimi, David Lynch, Sean Baker, Lars von Trier, and David Cronenberg, just to name a few. He has incredible range, not just in the types of characters he plays, but in the kinds of movies he takes on. He's frequently appeared as a leading man, but his performances in smaller supporting roles are often even more memorable. So what makes Dafoe's work so unique and evocative? Why is he such a versatile artist that so many filmmakers are happy to include in their films?
What do you see? What is around me? Is it dark?
And what makes his work such a unique force in cinema, despite having never won an Oscar and not being cast in the kinds of lead roles that typically get the most recognition in the industry? I think the answer lies in Dafoe's unusual background and radical perspective on the craft of acting.
My face has a mind of its own, but I let it go. I don't censor it.
When you think of Willem Dafoe, you might think of a moment like this, or maybe even something like this. Dafoe's unabashed, expressive theatricality, especially with his face, is a big part of what makes him so recognizable. As the Green Goblin in Spider-Man No Way Home, each emotional beat is marked with a magnified expression. These are often punctuated with clear movements that act as a kind of emphasis. Or look at this smart little salute he gives in a very different role as Klaus in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Here, the way he moves down to the diminutive crouch as he almost slinks away is comically unnatural, which works perfectly for a Wes Anderson film. But these choices aren't just comedic. They convey something sincere about the character's fragile ego, sensitivity, and loyalty and duty to his position as part of Zissou's crew. It's clear from moments like these that Dafoe isn't afraid of coloring a little outside the lines of what we expect from a typical Hollywood performance. This means at times, moments of his performance can almost feel like exaggerated caricature, at least compared to the muted naturalism of most of the performances we see these days. And I'm totally aware that caricature and unnatural are terms that are usually taken or used as criticisms or insults when it comes to acting. But here's the thing about Dafoe. He just doesn't care about realism.
That's the beauty of it, in a funny way, that it's not real, that you're constructing something that's other than reality.
The result is that Dafoe's Green Goblin isn't just a villainous scientist. He's the archetype of comic book menace. It's an almost cartoonish villainy that shows he really understood the assignment of playing a villain in a comic book film. And it's why, for many, he's one of the most memorable villains in any of the superhero films. When he plays an evil biker in To Live and Die in LA, or a criminal lowlife in Wild at Heart, he isn't just the film's bad guy. It's almost as if he's playing a symbolic representation of the devil himself. When he plays a lighthouse keeper, it doesn't just feel like any lighthouse keeper. It feels like the iconic lighthouse keeper, the sum total of every grizzled sailor from every storybook. His performance helps elevate the film from something that feels like a story of something that happened to something more like a myth or fairy tale. He's not the only one who pushes the boundaries like this, but he's one of the few who does it this consistently and boldly. I don't know many people who can go head to head in a film with Nicolas Cage and come out with the more intense performance in the film. But why is Dafoe's bold and stylized approach so rare?
Try to make a bad painting. Try to act badly. Try to be lousy in that scene. It's interesting. You've got to find ways to let you not worry and be free, you know? That's all.
Take a look at this moment from a conversation between Dafoe and director Robert Eggers.
Perhaps like indulging in the performance.
But I don't see it as that. It's funny.
I don't think I would, that's a cruel assessment.
No.
Here, Eggers tries to bring up the stylized theatrical quality of many of Dafoe's performances, but feels awkward about it, almost as if he's afraid of saying something offensive.
Sometimes a very naturalistic performance, to me, looks lazy and not engaged. Where I like it a little kicked up.
These days in popular culture, we so strongly associate realistic with good performance that implying a performance might be unrealistic, unnatural, or stylized is often taken as a critique. It's hard for many people today to even imagine that an actor might deliberately strive for something unrealistic. But there was a time when most actors in theater and film didn't have realism as their ultimate goal. For these actors, the purpose of the theater was to create something larger than life. For them, the whole reason anyone would come to the theater was to see something other than reality. But in the early 1900s, Russian actors pioneered a radical new approach to acting. Their goal was what they called psychological realism. And this method of acting, taught by Konstantin Stanislavski, eventually revolutionized film acting when it made its way to Hollywood in the 1950s. These days, most actors, whether they realize it or not, follow an approach to acting that's grounded in the Russian tradition. And this approach is so ingrained that it affects not just how people act, but how we judge acting culturally. If you want the long version of this, I made a whole video about it, but I bring up the short version here because it's important background for understanding why what Dafoe is doing is so different. Dafoe is one of the people who consistently seems to be challenging these norms, even knowing that it won't always be what people like. Talking about his performance in Speed 2 in an interview he gave with Variety, he said this.
A lot of people give me a hard time about that. They tease me about the size of my performance, that it was over the top. But I swear to God, I stand by that performance because there was no other way to do it.
And what makes his commitment to these bold swings impressive to me is that it's 100% a choice. We've seen he absolutely has the ability to give totally naturalistic performances.
Back in the workforce?
Say what?
New job?
Yeah.
Interesting hours.
And his work in the Florida Project is probably the best example of this. Here, he's so natural, he doesn't for a moment feel out of place among a cast that mostly consists of non-professional actors. The character and the performance feel deeply lived in and true to the world of the film, which is depicted incredibly naturalistically by director Sean Baker. And he's delivered many other naturalistic performances throughout his career in movies like Mississippi Burning or The Hunter. So we know when he does something other than this, when he's pushing the conventions of film performance, it's a deliberate choice. And I think his willingness to push the boundaries of performance like this has its foundation in his unusual background as an actor. Dafoe didn't start out in classical theater, independent film, or a child actor as many successful actors do. Instead, he got his start in an experimental theater troupe called the Wooster Group, which he was committed to and involved with even after he started a successful film career. Avant-garde theater like this often works without any sense of conventional story or plot. Dafoe has mentioned that he's also taken inspiration from No theater, a form of Japanese performance that condenses acting into deliberate, slow, and regimented movements while still trying to express deep emotion. Since the actors wear masks, all the emotion must be expressed through subtle details in movement. In these forms, there's less emphasis on what's being conveyed through the performance and more on the playful creativity of how something's being expressed. Usually, when we think about how performance works in film, we're thinking about an actor using the tools of acting to construct a character within a storyline or plot. And then as the audience, we derive emotion and meaning from the character's arc within the story and what that story means. But more avant-garde and abstract forms of performance are often asking us if we can derive meaning not from a story, but from the very qualities of the performance itself. It forces the artist to find what makes a good performance in the movement, rhythm, vocal delivery, emotion, and presence.
You don't paint the tree, you paint what you see. And what you see is color, shadow, line. Everything gets broken down. It's similar with acting a little bit. Concentrate on those things. Don't try to express the tree. Express the fundamentals.
And this is where Dafoe excels, by bringing his experience with more abstract performance even into films with conventional story and plot. In his work on screen, the playful how of his performance often has a lot to do with the expressive capability of his face, the cadence of his speech, but especially the physicality of his acting. There are many examples of how he uses physicality that I could highlight, but as I was researching this video, the one that stood out to me the most was the way he uses walking. Look at this scene from the Florida Project, where basically all he does is walk from the lobby to his office. And just the way he moves as this character, so much is conveyed. There's a sincerity, you can tell he really takes his job seriously, but you can also tell this guy is tired and overworked. Through that, though, there still comes a certain playful energy. I honestly didn't know it was possible for one actor to come up with this many distinct walks. From role to role, the way he moves his arms, the cadence of his step, or the energy of the walk always feels like it tells you something about who he's playing. And this part of his performances is there when he's at his most natural and his most theatrical. Watch any of Dafoe's roles and you won't just find an expressive face, but a body that expresses the character with every action. And these actions for Dafoe are the core of what acting is.
As an actor, you're concentrating on doing things, on committing to actions and folding into the actions and submitting to the story.
But this doesn't mean as an actor, he's trying to consciously express the character with each action.
Sometimes when people don't understand performing very well, they say, wow, you made some great expressions. I didn't make the expressions. My body made the expression because I was doing a particular thing and then it manifests in that expression. But I'm not thinking about that. My body gets driven by something else, something mysterious.
Instead, his advice for actors is to do things for the sake of doing them, to be so immersed in what you're doing that you're not lifting the cup because of what it means for the character. Instead, you're lifting the cup because you're lifting a cup. Performance for Dafoe is about being present in what the character is doing and giving yourself the freedom to go where this takes your physical experience. I think what really sets him apart is he gives himself enough freedom to go beyond what might feel natural or real.
I gave it everything I got, and I get nothing. A guy like me never learns.
In one interview, he said this is also his advice for life, to lift the cup for the sake of lifting the cup. I take this as a call to be immersed fully in what we're doing as creatives or artists, to create the art for the sake of doing it, not because we have some goal in mind for what it is going to accomplish. We live in a world where so much of what motivates people is the money or the fame that we might get from having successfully done something. Oftentimes we're even motivated by a desire not to fail instead of just a desire to do the thing itself, to create the art because we find the act of creating it meaningful and fulfilling on its own. What if instead we're motivated by a desire to be immersed in whatever we're doing with a sense of wonder, curiosity, and even play? I think this is where true artistry and creativity lies. And if you're deeply immersed in creative play, maybe it'll take you to something deeply realistic or naturalistic, but maybe it'll take you beyond that. And I think more people should give themselves the freedom to explore where their creative play naturally takes them. Dafoe's work reminds us of just how boundless the possibilities of performance are, and just how fun a performance can be. He's not the only actor working that is willing to embrace theatricality in film acting, but he's one of the most prolific and daring. And his success speaks to the fact that while we might expect a level of realism from performances, we still as audiences often enjoy performances that take us somewhere else. Cinema isn't just for telling a story inside a convincing imitation of our world. It can also be something entirely new, entirely separate from reality. And that's where Dafoe's work often takes us. It reminds us that appearing on a stage or screen is a chance to offer the audience something beyond their everyday world, but which still resonates with their emotions, fears, sense of wonder, and curiosity. He fully embraces the possibility of acting as a craft, as an abstract art form, and even as play. And he doesn't seem to take it too seriously. He's willing to fail. And I think that's what makes him one of the most interesting and compelling actors of our time. I think naturalism and realism in film are incredibly powerful. A lot of my favorite performances are performances that feel almost impossibly real. But I think if we conflate good acting with realistic acting, we put performance in an incredibly tiny box and miss out on the full potential of what cinema has to offer. One of the things I talk about in this video, and something that's a frequently occurring theme on my channel, is the difference between what is being conveyed and how it's being conveyed. In a sense, this is like a core thesis of my work, that in order to understand media, whether it's film or TV or the news, we need to look at not just what is being conveyed through the media, but how the media is conveying that. And this is why I love Ground News, the sponsor for this video, because Ground News gives you the tools not just to consume the news, but to understand the structure of the news as a whole and how that shapes the meaning that is communicated through the news. When we look at news stories, there are the facts that are communicated on the page, but there are a lot of other factors that influence how we perceive meaning through the news, and Ground News specifically highlights those for us. So for example, look at this article. Female protagonists reach parity with men in top grossing films of 2024. On Ground News though, you don't just get the story, you can see the bias distribution of who is reporting the story. You can quickly browse different headlines. It lets you easily see how different publications interpret the same events in different ways, and how headlines often tell an incomplete story. One of the features I really love is that with the Vantage subscription, Ground News tells you who owns the source the news is coming from. I love how you can browse through all the headlines and easily flip through different sources without even leaving the app. For me, staying informed isn't just about getting the facts that you get from an individual news story, but understanding the media landscape and the narratives that are being conveyed through the media. Ground News is a platform that helps you grow your media literacy while you consume the news. I'm happy to offer 40% off the Vantage subscription. If you use my link, you can go to the link in the description or go to ground.news/ThomasFlight to get that 40% off now. You can click the link on the screen or in the description. Again, that's ground.news/ThomasFlight. Go to my link to get that 40% off the Vantage subscription so that you can have a better understanding of the news you're consuming today. Thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video.